Now, yesterday we got a look behind the scenes of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus with the premiere of Obi-Wan Kenobi: A Jedi's Return, and overall I'd say it was fine. It was pretty much what you'd expect it to be and was similar to all the other behind the scenes looks we've gotten for all the other shows on Disney Plus. The biggest difference with this one is I'd say it was a little less about the actual making of the show and more about the importance of it all to the returning actors, mainly Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor, which is to be expected and was great and a bit emotional to see, to be honest with you. If nothing else, I hope both of them are truly happy to have come back and pleased with the results of the series. Even if not all fans were entirely thrilled with what it ended up being, myself included. In fact, I almost found myself a little, sad and upset that I hadn't enjoyed it more, that it turned out to be, in my opinion, you can certainly feel differently, but that it had been pretty generic or a pretty generic story overall. Not to mention all the sort of continuity issues it creates, like the Empire now being able to, or they should be able to, put together that Bail Organa has a direct connection to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that he's essentially a Jedi sympathizer, which should make it very, very difficult to be a founding member of the rebellion now, if not just get him arrested. And then there's, of course, arguably the biggest problem of the whole show, in my opinion, which is that Obi-Wan just lets Vader live in the end. And yeah, I of course realize it had to happen that way, that we couldn't just have Obi-Wan kill Vader or we'd have a major continuity break on our hands. But I'd argue just in story in that very moment that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Obi-Wan to let him live, especially after coming to terms with the fact that yes, Anakin is essentially dead and gone, and that Darth Vader is all that is left now, which we know from later on in Return of the Jedi is what Obi-Wan truly does believe.
He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil.
Along with this, we also know that all those years later in Return of the Jedi, he will fully believe the only way to stop Darth Vader, their only hope, or the only hope for the galaxy, if you will, is for Luke to kill him.
I can't kill my own father.
Then the Emperor has already won.
And yet here, despite him saying, I will do what I must yet again, and even saying it's him or me this time, Obi-Wan, again, he just lets Darth Vader live, which Ewan McGregor does try to explain in this by saying this.
I think there's something about the acceptance, more than he's then able to kill him, which he doesn't do, he's able to walk away from carrying this terrible guilt. He sees that Anakin is no longer there, that Vader is Vader. So he's able to move on. There's a bit of closure for Obi-Wan.
And sure, that's great, and even makes sense that in that moment he'd be able to get over his guilt. Anakin even flat out tells him that it was Vader that killed Anakin. Problem is, Obi-Wan, thanks to walking away when he literally could have and did Darth Vader, he's now going to have to carry the guilt of everything else Vader will go on to do in the next 15 years or so. All the people he will kill and just all the evil he's going to do and bring to the galaxy. All that blood is now going to be on Obi-Wan's hands because this time he flat out knows he is letting him live, whereas the last time in Revenge of the Sith, he can probably assume that leaving him there on a lava shore hacked up and burnt to pieces, that Anakin was going to, soon enough, die. Even though, at that point Obi-Wan would know that Darksiders don't always die so easily, that Maul survived being cut in half and falling down a shaft, and so he would think, maybe my old buddy is just angry enough to survive all of this just like Maul once did. But again, in Revenge of the Sith, we had kind of the same problem we had in the Kenobi series, that both of them have to survive. We know both of them are going to live to do other things or to meet again someday, so you have to separate the two combatants in a way that at least is somewhat believable, where one would let the other live, which is hard to believe, or better yet, they would think the other was dead or was going to die, as is the actual case in Revenge of the Sith. Or something else happens that just ends the fight and they have to go their separate ways, knowing the other has survived. All of which could have been, or would have been, better options for the Kenobi series than what we got, than Kenobi just walking away. I mean, I do get it, wanting to show him walking away from his guilt, but literally wasn't the only way to pull that off or show it. Moving on, one thing I really did enjoy in this behind-the-scenes look was hearing Hayden Christensen talk a little bit about his thoughts on Darth Vader and how he thinks a part of Anakin is always still in there, which I think is of course true considering Luke does eventually bring him back. He's just buried under all that hate and anger. I also like how Hayden once again confirms that in the mind of George Lucas, Anakin is, was, and always will be the chosen one.
As it was explained to me by George Lucas, even when he becomes Darth Vader and even when he's fully immersed in the dark side, he is still the chosen one.
Even though, according to Rebels, Obi-Wan thinks Luke to be the chosen one, or at least that's what he basically tells Maul when he finally does die for good this time.
Tell me, is it the chosen one?
He is.
Which does make sense that Obi-Wan would think Luke is the chosen one, considering he thinks Luke is going to one day destroy Vader and Sidious. He's going to destroy the Sith. That's the plan he has for him anyway, even though it of course doesn't go quite that way. Another part I found really interesting was Deborah Chow talking about Leia, and she even says this of strong female characters today.
I feel like a lot of times nowadays, people are saying, oh, it's a strong woman and she's tough, and it just kind of means that she's killing everybody. And Carrie was not like that. Carrie, in Princess Leia, you had somebody that was a rebel, was a fighter, but she was also intelligent, she was funny, but she could also be warm, she could be loving. And she really kind of had this multi-dimensional characterization that was just wonderful.
And I think that just might be the best, most succinct way I've ever heard of the problem with many of today's strong female characters summed up. That being they just kill people and essentially are just physically strong and badass with no sort of nuance or complexity to the character. Which is kind of ironic considering many will say that toxic masculinity is a big problem or concern today, that you don't want to basically glorify senseless male violence, but then there's also this push to show more physically strong female characters who have little or nothing else to them other than showcasing their physical strength and ability, which they oftentimes use to hurt other people. And in reality, what makes any character, male or female, good is a level of vulnerability and or weakness of some kind. The best characters tend to be the ones we connect to on an emotional level that feel like real humans in difficult or even incredible situations that they must somehow overcome, but not because they are already great and strong and better than everyone else they're going to face, but because they aren't, yet still find a way to prevail. That said, one area I do disagree with Deborah Chow on is when she talks about and or kind of implies that many do not consider Leia as important to the story as she is or should be considered, that she has always taken a back seat to Luke, if you will. And really, I don't think many, if any people really feel that way about Leia, that people don't understand and or recognize her importance just because the story doesn't necessarily center around her or the story in the original trilogy, but instead centers around Luke more so. Nor am I entirely sure that making 9-year-old Leia the savior of a broken Obi-Wan Kenobi gives her this elevation in importance that they think it does. It just, to me, feels very contrived, and again, leads to continuity issues like Leia seemingly not knowing Obi-Wan in A New Hope when she sends him that famous message, yet now it turns out they formed a very close friendship. And yes, I've heard all the excuses and explanations for this. I've had people bring up Leia's excitement after hearing that Luke is with Ben Kenobi.
I'm here to rescue you. I've got your R2 unit. I'm here with Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi, where is he?
Come on.
But I honestly do not think in any way, shape, or form that's meant to imply that Leia personally knows Ben, as much as she just was excited to hear the name Kenobi. It's also very possible that Bail told his daughter he goes by Ben these days, but since she didn't personally know him, she used the name Obi-Wan to make it more formal. This even gets backed up by her never again mentioning Ben Kenobi during their escape, much less, making sure he maybe gets off the Death Star alive with them, that the guy who once saved her life twice and that she became really close to, that he wouldn't end up dying here and now. But anyway, I've gone into all this before, so I will close this out by saying, no matter what you thought of the series itself, the peek behind the scenes, getting to hear Hayden and Ewan talk about these characters, what they and Star Wars mean to them, what they mean to each other, and all of this was absolutely worth the watch. And as I said before, I was truly happy to have them back, even if I didn't exactly love the series we got them back in. And again, I do hope that they at least are very happy and content with what the series turned out to be. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me, have you watched this behind the scenes special and what did you think of it? Either way, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.